They laughed first, not cruelly, not loudly, but with the soft, careless amusement people reserve for things they've already decided don't matter. She stood at the edge of the dart hall like misplaced thought, hands folded around a cheap wooden case that looked older than the tournament itself. The room pulsed with confidence, polished shoes tapping impatient karakitas, tailored jerseys clinging to practiced bodies, sponsors, logos flashing under hot lights. Names were whispered with reverence here. Rankings mattered. Histories mattered. She did not. No one knew her name and no one bothered to ask. A man near the registration table smirked as she stepped forward. Someone else muttered that she must be lost. Another voice, too loud, too casual, wondered if this was some kind of joke. The officials exchanged looks, the kind that silently ask whether rules require politeness. Technically, she had registered. Technically, she belonged. She wore no uniform. Just plain cardigan, slightly frayed at the cuffs, and sensible shoes that made no sound on the floor. Her hair was pulled back without care for symmetry. She looked like someone who had come to watch, not to compete. Someone's aunt. Someone's neighbor. Someone you overlook your whole life without realizing it. When her name was finally called, mispronounced, then corrected, there was a ripple of restrained laughter. Her opponent didn't even hide his grin. A regional favorite. Broad shoulders. Confident stance. The kind of man who had been throwing darts since his hands were barely big enough to hold them. He didn't shake her hand at first. She took her place anyway. The dart felt familiar in her fingers, though no one noticed the way her grip settled, natural, unforced, as if memory lived in her muscles. The board seemed farther away under the lights, the air heavier with expectation and disbelief. Someone in the back whispered, "This won't take long." She raised her arm. There was no dramatic pause, no flourish. Just a smooth, almost gentle motion, so calm it felt out of place in a room buzzing with ego. The dart left her hand. It cut through the air without tremor, without hesitation, and buried itself dead center in the triple 20. Perfect. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. Silence fell awkwardly, like dropped glass that hadn't shattered yet. The scoreboard updated with an indifferent beep, confirming what everyone could already see but didn't quite believe. A perfect score. Someone laughed, then stopped. Her opponent's smile faded, replaced by confusion. The officials leaned forward. A few people stood without realizing they had. The room, moments ago so certain of itself, seemed to tilt ever so slightly. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply reached for the next dart. And that was when the whispers changed. The whispers no longer carried amusement, they carried calculation. People leaned closer, as if distance had been the problem all along. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. The man with the clipboard stopped pretending not to stare. Her opponent shifted his weight, suddenly aware of his own briefing, of the way confidence can evaporate when it realizes it has no foundation. She rolled the second dart between her fingers, testing its balance. The room watched her hand now, not her clothes, not her age, not the quiet ordinariness everyone had mistaken for weakness. Just her hand. Someone murmured, "Beginner's luck." But the word luck sounded vain, fragile, like a lie told out of habit. She lifted her arm again. This time, the throw came faster. The dart struck the board with a sharper sound, slicing into the red band beside the first, another triple 20. Gasps broke free before anyone could stop them. A man near the bar choked on his drink. Her opponent blinked, once, twice, as if waiting for the board to correct itself. It didn't. The scoreboard climbed higher, merciless in its clarity. Her face remained unreadable, but her eyes, steady, focused, never left the board. There was something unsettling in that calm, something that suggested this moment was not new to her, only newly witnessed. Like a storm that has always existed but only now reached the shore. The third dart hovered briefly between her fingers. The hall felt smaller. Hotter. Every sound, the hum of the lights, the distant clink of glass, the shallow breath of the crowd, seemed amplified. Even the man who had mocked her at registration stood frozen, mouth slightly open, as if words had abandoned him. Her opponent finally cleared his throat. "Take your time," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She didn't look at him. The dart flew. For a split second, it seemed impossible, too perfect, too precise to be real. Then it landed exactly where the other two rested, crowding the triple 20 so tightly it looked intentional, deliberate, inevitable. Maximum score: 180. The hall erupted, not into cheers, but into stunned noise. Disbelief clashed with awe. People spoke all at once, voices overlapping, trying to explain what they had just seen without admitting the truth forming quietly in their minds. They had been wrong. Very wrong. Her opponent stepped back from the line as if the space itself had betrayed him. He rubbed his jaw, then laughed, short, nervous. "All right," he said, louder than necessary. "All right then." Only now did she turn her head slightly, acknowledging him for the first time. There was no triumph in her expression. No challenge. Just calm recognition, as if she were greeting something she had been expecting. As the official scrambled to confirm the score, a woman in the front row whispered, "Who is she?" No one answered. Because somewhere beneath the murmurs, beneath the rising curiosity and sudden respect, deeper tension had begun to coil, one that comes when a story people thought they understood starts rewriting itself in real time. And as she stepped back to allow her opponent his turn, adjusting the sleeve of her cardigan with quiet precision, it became clear to everyone watching. That first perfect shot hadn't been a statement. It had been a warning. Her opponent approached the line, but the space no longer belonged to him. He threw well. Any other night, his darts would have drawn applause. A solid score. Respectable. Yet each thunk against the board sounded muted now, like footsteps in a room where something monumental had already happened. When he finished, he glanced once, just once, at the cluster of darts she had left behind, still embedded like a signature no one could erase. When it was her turn again, the room fell silent without instruction. No laughter. No whispers. Just waiting. She retrieved her darts with care, fingertips brushing the board as if greeting an old friend. For the briefest moment, something flickered across her face, nostalgia, perhaps, or restraint. Then she stepped back into position. This time, she missed. Barely. The dart landed just outside the triple ring, a clean 20. A collective breath released, equal parts relief and disappointment. Proof, maybe, that she was human after all. Someone nodded, satisfied, as though balance had been restored to the universe. Then the second dart struck, triple 19. The third followed, another triple. The scoreboard climbed again, methodical, unforgiving. Not miraculous. Not flashy. Just devastatingly consistent. A man near the back muttered, "That's not luck." No one argued. Her throws carried no urgency, no hunger for attention. She moved with the confidence of someone who had long ago stopped needing validation. Each motion was efficient, refined gear repetition no one in this room had witnessed. The kind of repetition that happens late at night, or early in the morning, or in places where no one is watching because no one thinks to look. Between rounds, people began to talk, not about her clothes or her age, but about her form. Her release. Her control under pressure. Words reserved for professionals. For legends. The officials checked her registration again. Still, she said nothing. Her opponent, now visibly rattled, tried to reclaim momentum. He squared his shoulders, breathed deeply, and threw harder than before. One dart bounced out. The sound echoed like a crack in glass. He swore under his breath. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable, not with his failure, but with the sudden reversal of roles. Pressure had changed hands. As the match progressed, something subtle but profound happened. The audience stopped watching the scoreboard and started watching her. The way she adjusted her stance even a fraction of an inch. The way her eyes narrowed, not at the board, but at something beyond it, as if she were measuring more than distance. As if she were remembering. A rumor began to ripple through the seats. Someone said they'd seen her years ago. Another claimed an old championship photo looked just like her, only younger, fiercer. His name was whispered, then dismissed, then whispered again, spoken carefully. Like Igwiti you're not sure you're allowed to believe in. She heard none of it. Or perhaps she heard everything and chose silence anyway. With each round, the gap widened. Not dramatically. Not cruelly. Just enough to make the outcome feel inevitable. Her opponent stopped smiling. Stopped performing. He was no longer playing to win, only to survive with dignity. And then, as she stepped forward once more, dart poised, the lights flickered. Just for a second. Barely noticeable, yet enough to cast strange shadows across the board, enough to make the room collectively hold its breath again. She paused, not because of the lights, but because something else had shifted. A wait. A recognition. Her eyes lifted from the board for the first time since the match began. They swept across the crowd. And in that moment, everyone felt it, the unsettling sensation that she wasn't proving herself anymore. She was deciding something. The dart remained suspended in her fingers, the hall frozen around her, as if the next throw would do far more than change the score. Her arm lowered slightly. Not in hesitation, more like reconsideration. The crowd sensed it immediately. The tension sharpened, no longer about whether she would win, but how this moment would be shaped. Victory was no longer the question. Meaning was. Somewhere near the judges' table, a man leaned toward an older official and whispered his name again, more confidently this time. The official stiffened, eyes narrowing as he studied her posture, the angle of her shoulders, the unmistakable economy of motion. Recognition tugged at him, slow and unsettling. She exhaled. The dart flew. It didn't strike the triple. Instead, it landed cleanly in the outer bowl, deliberate, controlled, almost surgical. Not the highest score she could make. The score of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. A murmur rolled through the hall, confusion threading through Owie. Will we pull back now? Elvis changed course when dominance was within reach. Her opponent stared at the board, then at her, as if seeing two versions of the same truth and unable to reconcile them. She stepped back, and for the first time, her expression softened, not into a smile, but into something closer to resolve. The official cleared his throat. Ma'am, he began, voice uncertain, could you confirm your previous competition history? The question cut through the noise. Every head turned. She looked at him calmly, then down at her hands. Her fingers bore faint calluses, old and ingrained, the kind that never fully disappear. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried effortlessly across the room. I haven't played publicly in a long time. That was all. Not an explanation. Not denial. The official swallowed. You understand, he said carefully, that your performance suggests. I know what it suggests, she replied, gently. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. The name surfaced again, louder now, stitched together from memory and disbelief. A former champion. Prodigy who vanished after the final that no one talked about anymore. His career that ended not with defeat, but with silence. Her opponent took a step toward her, then stopped. Well, you've come back, he asked, not accusing, almost pleading. She met his eyes at last. Because, she said, choosing the word with care, some things don't stay buried just because people stop looking for them. The scoreboard blinked, waiting. The match was still live. The rules still intact. Yet something far larger than a tournament now occupied the space between the board and the throwing line. The audience wasn't just watching a game anymore, they were witnessing the resurfacing of a story that had never truly ended. She turned back to the board, reclaiming her stance. The dart felt heavier now, not with doubt, but with consequence. And as she raised her arm once more, the hall understood, collectively and unmistakably, that whatever happened next would not simply decide the winner. It would decide how much of the past was about to be rewritten. The silence thickened, pressing against the walls, against the lungs of everyone watching. She didn't rush the throw. Her feet settled into place with practiced certainty, heels aligned just so the dart rested between her fingers, its weight familiar in a way that suggested history, long hours, forgotten rooms, victories no one had applauded. The board seemed almost closer now, as if drawn toward her using gravity rather than aim. Behind her, someone dropped a glass. It shattered. No one turned. She released. The dart arced cleanly and struck the 18, precise and intentional. Not flashy. Strategic. The kind of throw made you eye someone thinking several turns ahead. The scoreboard ticked upward again, calm and impartial, as if unaware of the tension it was measuring. Her opponent exhaled slowly, nodded to himself, and stepped forward. He played better now, not because pressure had lifted, but because clarity had arrived. He was no longer fighting embarrassment. He was competing with something rare. Respect had entered the game. Round after round, they traded throws. The match transformed, less spectacle, more chess. Angles mattered. Risks were calculated. The crowd followed every dart like he held breath, tracking not just points, but intention. No one spoke unless absolutely necessary. Between turns, the official who had recognized her moved quietly among the judges, murmuring confirmations. Old records. Archived footage. Profile photo grainy with age but unmistakable in the eyes. When he returned to the table, his hands trembled. The audience felt the shift before it was announced. Still, she said nothing. Her cardigan sleeve slipped slightly as she raised her arm again, revealing a faint scar along her forearm, thin, pale, deliberate. A mark of something that hadn't been accidental. A few people noticed. Fewer understood. Another dart flew. 16. The exact number she needed. The crowd surged, but she remained still, eyes fixed on the board as if waiting for something else to happen, something beyond cheers, beyond validation. Her opponent lowered his head briefly, then looked up and smiled, genuine this time. Well played, he said quietly. She inclined her head in return. But the match wasn't over. Because the official stood. Before we proceed, he said, voice steady but strained, there is a matter of eligibility that must be addressed. A wave of murmurs rolled through the hall, confusion, frustration, anticipation. She closed her eyes for just a moment, as if she had known this was coming. When she opened them, there was no fear there. Only acceptance. You're certain? She asked him. He nodded. The records match. She turned toward the crowd. For the first time, she faced them fully, not as a competitor, not as an underdog, but as someone reclaiming space long denied. The lights caught her face now, and the years seemed to rearrange themselves, revealing something indelible beneath time's quiet erosion. Didn't come to take anything from anyone, she said softly. I came to see if Izai's hand still remembered who they were. The hall was utterly still. Somewhere, camera whirred to life. And as the official prepared to speak the name the sport had half forgotten and half feared, she stepped back toward the line again, dart in hand, ready to throw, ready to be seen, ready to continue a story that had never truly been allowed to finish. The official drew a breath, then hesitated. The name hovered on his tongue like a spark near dry tinder. Before he could speak it aloud, she raised one finger, not commanding, not dramatic, just enough to pause him. He stopped instantly, as if instinct overruled authority. "Let me finish the match," she said. Not request. Not challenge. A simple statement of order. The judges exchanged looks. Rules were consulted in hurried whispers. Cameras leaned in closer, sensing something rare unfolding, sport giving way to story. Finally, the head judge nodded once. "One more round," he agreed. A collective exhale swept the hall. Her opponent stepped back to his mark, shoulders squared, eyes clear. Whatever this had become, he would meet it honestly. His throw was strong, focused, defiant. The darts landed clean, efficient, as if he were anchoring himself to the present while history threatened to flood the room. When it was her turn, she didn't step forward right away. She looked at the board, yes, but beyond it too, through it, as though seeing another hall layered beneath this one. Dimmer lights. Fewer spectators. A younger version of herself standing in the same posture, heart racing, unaware of how quickly brilliance can be complicated via expectation. Her fingers tightened slightly. Then loosened. She stepped to the line. This throw carried something different, not restraint, not dominance, but honesty. The dart struck the triple with a solid, resonant sound that echoed longer than physics should allow. Applause broke free despite attempts to contain it. The second dart followed, equally true. The third hovered for half a heartbeat longer than the others. The room leaned forward as one. She released. It struck the board, clean but not perfect, just outside the triple, intentional or not no one could say. The scoreboard updated, the numbers aligning into a narrow lead. Enough. She lowered her arm. The match ended not with an explosion, but with certainty. Her opponent extended his hand immediately this time. She took it. Their handshake was firm, mutual, unperformative. Two players acknowledging the truth of what had just happened. The official stood again, no hesitation now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "we owe you clarity." She didn't turn away. She didn't brace herself either. As the first syllable of her name began to form, she reached into the worn wooden case at her side and opened it. Inside lay not just darts, but a folded badge, yellowed at the edges, bearing an old Federation seal and a ranking number that once meant everything. She placed it gently on the table. The cameras zoomed in. Gasps rippled outward. And just as the recognition swept through the room, just as the weight of what her return truly meant began to settle, she picked up one final dart, rolled it between her fingers, and stepped back toward the line, as if the story still demanded motion, as if stopping now would be the only real loss. The officials froze, unsure whether to stop her or let the moment breathe. No rulebook had prepared them for this, history stepping back onto the ouch and refusing to stay still. She didn't wait for permission. The final dart felt lighter than the others, almost curious in her hand. The crowd no longer whispered, they barely breathed. Even the cameras seemed to hold back, lenses steady, operators afraid to interrupt whatever fragile alignment had formed between past and present. She didn't aim immediately. Instead, she spoke, quietly, but the acoustics carried her words as if the hall itself wanted to listen. "I left because I forgot Karai started," she said. "Not because I couldn't win. Because winning became louder than the game." A few heads nodded. Others stiffened. More than one former champion in the audience felt the words land uncomfortably close. She raised her arm. This throw was different from all the others. There was no calculation in it, no strategy. No message to prove. It was muscle memory stripped bare, a conversation between hand and board that needed no audience. The dart flew. It struck the board with a duller sound than expected, landing cleanly in the single bowl. Not spectacular. Not dominant. But precise in a way that felt intentional, as if the point wasn't the number, but the choice. She stepped back. The official finally found his voice. He spoke her name now, clearly, fully. It rolled through the hall like a long-lost melody being remembered, gives people who didn't realize they still knew it. Reactions fractured across the room. Shock. Validation. Awe. Regret. Phones were raised. Messages were already being typed to people not present, trying to explain something that refused to shrink into words. She closed the wooden case and tucked it under her arm. "This doesn't mean I'm back," she said, turning slightly, addressing no one and everyone at once. "And it doesn't mean I'm gone." Her eyes drifted to the younger players near the back, those who had watched with unfiltered wonder, not burdened by old headlines or rivalries. For a moment, her expression softened again, something like recognition passing between generations without being spoken aloud. The head judge cleared his throat. "There will be questions," he said carefully. "From the Federation. From the press." She nodded. "I know." Then she looked back at the board, at the quiet circle that had never changed, no matter how much else had. Her fingers brushed the line once more, not to cross it, not yet, just to feel where she stood. And the hall understood, instinctively, that this night had not been about a tournament at all. It had been an opening. No one moved to block her as she stepped away from the line. The applause that finally rose was uncertain at first, scattered, almost thawing. Then it gathered weight, layered hand over hand until it filled the hall with something warmer than noise. Not celebration. Recognition. The kind given when witnesses realize they've just seen the beginning of something they won't fully understand until much later. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She simply walked, slowly, deliberately, past the tables, past the stunned commentators, past the banners that bore names once carved into the sport's mythology. A few of those names belonged to people watching her now, their expressions caught somewhere between pride and unease. At the exit, she paused. Not for the crowd, but for a young woman standing near the door, clutching her darts too tightly, knuckles white. The girl's eyes were wide, unguarded, reflecting something raw and electric. Hope, perhaps. Or permission. She met the girl's gaze. "Don't let them tell you when you're finished," she said quietly. The girl nodded, tears threatening, though she didn't yet know Galv. Behind them, officials were already arguing in hushed urgency. Emergency meetings. Rule interpretations. Invitations that would be framed as honors but carry the weight of obligation. The Federation logo glowed too brightly on the far wall, suddenly exposed. She pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in, sharp and grounding. Outside, the night waited, unimpressed, infinite. For a moment, she stood between worlds. Behind her, a sport scrambling to rewrite its narrative. Ahead of her, the quiet freedom of anonymity. Then a voice called out. "Wait." She turned. It was the official again, older than he looked, younger than his memories. He held the badge she had placed on the table, the yellowed edges trembling slightly in his grip. "You earned this once," he said. "You don't lose it because time passes." She studied the badge, then shook her head gently. "I never lost it," she replied. "I just stopped carrying it, see." He didn't know what to say to that. She stepped into the night, the door swinging shut behind her, cutting off the lights, the noise, the certainty. For several seconds, no one inside spoke. It felt as though the room itself was waiting for instruction. Somewhere far from the hall, she walked with the wooden case under her arm, the echoes of darts still humming faintly in her hands. And somewhere behind her, phones kept buzzing, plans kept forming, questions kept multiplying, because once a legend reminds the world she still exists, the world never quite knows how to let her disappear again. She stepped back at last, giving the dart hall room to breathe again. The young player threw once more, cleaner this time. Not perfect, but better. He turned to her instinctively, searching her face for judgment. She gave a small nod, the kind that doesn't praise the result, but the effort behind it. That's how it starts, she said. Not with winning. With listening. The officials eventually reclaimed the floor. The tournament resumed, brackets repaired, schedules adjusted. The noise returned, cheers, groans, the familiar rariquitas of competition, but it had changed. The room had changed. Even the walls seemed to hold on to what had passed through them. She declined the interviews. She declined the cameras. When an organizer asked where she would be playing next, she paused only a moment before answering. Wherever I'm needed, she said. As the night thinned and players filtered out, some still buzzing, some quiet with thought, she gathered her things. The wooden case felt lighter now, not because it held less, but because it no longer carried only memory. At the exit, she stopped and looked back once more at the boards, unchanged, waiting, patient as ever. For years, she had believed walking away meant closing the door. Now she understood the truth. The game had never shut her out. It had simply been waiting for her to return on her own terms. She stepped into the cool night air without ceremony, without applause following her, just the soft knowledge that somewhere behind her, a room full of people would never look at the Och the same way again. And somewhere ahead, the darts would keep flying. Only now, they would carry a story with them.